On the happiest day of my life, the day my grandson was born, my daughter-in-law gave me an eviction letter. The rightful heir has been born, it read. She assumed that my husband had left me with nothing. I just smiled. When she finally left my son for her millionaire lover, she came back to find the locks changed. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. After my grandson was born, I received something I never imagined would follow such joy, a letter of eviction from my own daughter-in-law. The rightful heir, as she put it, had been born. What she didn't know was that I had already secured a hidden fortune of $2 million, money I had quietly inherited from my late husband. My name is Eileene, and I'm 72 years old. Yesterday should have been one of the happiest days of my life. Little Thomas, my first grandson, came into the world. I had gone to bed with my heart so full it felt almost too big for my chest. Today, that joy was crushed beneath a cold piece of paper and a smile that could have frozen the warmest heart. The letter came this morning, hand-delivered by Freya herself. She knocked on the door of my bedroom in the house I had helped buy, and walked right in as if it had always been hers, as though she had signed the deed herself. "Good morning, Eileene," she said, her tone laced with artificial sweetness that made my skin crawl. "I have something for you." I was still in my nightgown, having barely slept after the long emotional day before. My mind had been full of the memory of Thomas, the weight of him in my arms, the impossibly tiny fingers, that soft newborn scent that has the power to carry you decades back in time. I had held him for exactly 3 minutes yesterday before Freya decided I'd had enough. "What is it, dear?" I asked, though the sharp undertone in her voice had already made my stomach tighten. She extended the envelope with a bit of theatrical flair. "Open it." The paper was thick, expensive. Freya had always enjoyed a taste for the dramatic. My fingers trembled as I slid the letter free and began to read. "Notice to vacate, 30 days to remove myself and all my belongings from the residence. The legitimate heir had now been born, and my services were no longer required." Services. That's what she called 43 years of motherhood. Services. "I don't understand," I whispered, even though I understood all too well. This was Freya's victory lap. "It's quite simple," she replied, sinking into the chair by my window as though explaining something to a child. "Brent and I have our son now. We need the space. You've been living here rent-free for 2 years. And frankly, it's time you learn to take care of yourself. 2 years. 2 years since my husband Tyson died, leaving me, or so they believed, with nothing but this room in my son's house. 2 years of being treated like a long overstaying guest in what used to be my own home. "Where's Brent?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "At work, naturally. Someone has to provide for this family." She inspected her manicured nails. "He knows about this, of course. We discussed it thoroughly." My son knew. My own flesh and blood knew his wife was throwing me out like yesterday's garbage, and he had said nothing. "Freya, please, can't we talk about this? I help with the baby, I cook, I clean." "That's exactly the problem," she interrupted, her pleasant mask slipping. "You hover, you interfere, you make me feel like a guest in my own home." The irony almost made me laugh. I had been made to feel like a guest in my own son's life for years, and now she was complaining about the same thing. "I raised Brent in this house," I said softly. His father is dead," Freya snapped. "And Brent is my husband now. This is our family, our home, our life. You're just in the way." Each word struck like a blow. I glanced around the small room that had become my entire world. The wedding photo of Tyson and me on the nightstand, the quilt my mother had sewn draped over the chair, the little bookshelf filled with novels I'd collected over a lifetime. 30 days, Freya repeated, rising to her feet and smoothing her designer dress. "I think that's generous considering." "Considering what?" She paused at the door, her eyes suddenly colder, sharper. "Considering you never really belonged here anyway." When she left, I sat on the edge of my bed for hours, the eviction notice clutched in my hands. The house was quiet except for the occasional soft wail of the baby. My grandson, the child I had been so eager to hold, to spoil, to teach all the lessons I once taught his father. I thought about calling Brent, demanding to speak with him. But what would I say? That his wife was cruel? He already knew that I didn't deserve this. He had made his choice long ago. The truth was, I had been unknowingly preparing for this moment. Not the eviction itself, I never saw that coming, but the moment I would have to decide whether to keep pretending I was powerless. You see, Freya made one fatal miscalculation. She believed that because I dressed modestly, lived quietly, and never flaunted wealth, I didn't have any. She assumed that when Tyson passed, I had been left with nothing but the clothes on my back and a single room in my son's home. She was wrong. Hidden in a safety deposit box across town, quietly growing with interest for 2 years, sat $2 million. Tyson's life insurance payout, his retirement accounts, and the proceeds from the sale of assets Freya never even knew had existed. I had kept it secret not from greed but from caution. I had planned to use that money to secure Thomas's future. But now, sitting with that eviction notice in my lap, I realized something important. Before I could protect anyone else's future, I had to reclaim my own dignity. If Freya wanted me gone, fine. But she had no idea what she had just set in motion. That same afternoon, the boxes arrived. Freya had ordered them online for same-day delivery, just to make her point impossible to miss. I found them stacked neatly outside my door, like a countdown clock I could trip over. As I began folding my clothes, every garment carried a memory I had tucked away. The blue dress I'd worn to Brent's college graduation, bought secondhand because every penny that year went toward his tuition. The cardigan with the small hole at the elbow I never replaced because Brent had needed new textbooks that semester. People talk about a mother's sacrifices like there's something beautiful, noble, almost poetic. They don't mention how they slowly hollow you out, piece by piece, until you forget the person you were before you became someone's everything. After Tyson's first heart attack, when Brent was just 16, I took extra shifts at the department store. Tyson could no longer work construction, and Brent had dreams of becoming an engineer. College wasn't cheap, and scholarships were scarce. I remember the morning I sold my grandmother's pearl necklace. Brent needed a laptop for his senior year, and we were already behind on the mortgage. I told Tyson I'd misplaced it, couldn't bear to let him see the guilt in my eyes. Some sacrifices, I had learned, are meant to be invisible. When Brent was accepted into State University, I was so proud I cried for 3 days. But the tuition bills nearly crushed us. I took a weekend job cleaning offices, leaving the house before dawn and returning home long after dark. It was well past midnight. Tyson's health was getting worse by the day, yet he never once complained about the hours I spent away from him. He knew exactly what I was doing and why. "She's building my future," I once overheard him telling his brother, and he meant it. I remember another time hearing him say, "A mother does what she has to do." The bitter truth, the irony, was that I had believed I was teaching Brent about hard work, discipline, and perseverance. But looking back now, I see that the real lesson I gave him was something far different and far more dangerous. That mothers exist to give up everything, to endure anything, all without expecting a single thing in return. When Tyson passed away, I could have told Brent about the insurance money. $2 million, money that could have completely changed both our lives, wiped away his financial struggles and mine. But I looked at my son, drowning in grief, shouldering the weight of trying to provide for his new wife, and I made a choice. I decided I would live simply, help whenever I could, and keep that money set aside for true emergencies. Living under Brent's roof was never meant to be a long-term arrangement. I told myself it was just a temporary solution, just a few months while I figured out what came next in my life. But Freya, well, she had an entirely different vision. She moved into that house like a conquering army, taking possession of everything in her path. Within weeks, she had rearranged every room, thrown out Tyson's belongings without asking, and made it painfully clear that my presence there was merely tolerated, not welcomed. The sweet, charming young woman she had been during their courtship vanished the moment the wedding ring slid onto her finger. "Eileene, could you handle the laundry today? I'm just so tired." "Eileene, would you mind making dinner? Brent loves your pot roast." "Eileene, I've invited a few friends over. Maybe you could stay in your room for the evening." I went from being Brent's mother to being the live-in help, summoned only when convenient, invisible the rest of the time. And Brent, my sweet boy, the one who once would have gone to war for me, seemed utterly blind to the way his wife spoke to me. The worst part wasn't the endless work. It wasn't even the disrespect. It was watching my own son become someone I hardly recognized. The boy who used to step between me and playground bullies now stood silently by while his wife dismissed me like I was staff she'd never wanted to hire in the first place. "She's just particular about her space," he'd say, brushing off my concerns. You know how women can be about their homes? Their home. Not the home where Brent had grown up. Not the home Tyson and I had built together over decades. No, this was their home now, and I was the intruder. Things grew even worse when Freya got pregnant. Overnight, she became precious cargo, and I became her designated caretaker. Morning sickness duty, grocery shopping, driving her to doctor's appointments. If Brent couldn't take time off work, it was automatically my job. I didn't mind. I told myself I was doing it gladly, because surely once the baby arrived, we'd all come together as a family. But instead, the pregnancy became her perfect weapon. The baby needs stability, she would say whenever I suggested anything that might involve me more in their lives. Too many people around will confuse him. We need to establish routines without interference. Brent and I need to learn to be parents without someone hovering. And there Brent would be, nodding along, exhausted from his endless overtime shifts, never pausing to really think about the meaning behind her words. The night before Thomas was born, I helped Freya pack her hospital bag. She was already having contractions, but still insisted on micromanaging every single detail. "I only want immediate family in the delivery room," she announced through clenched teeth as another contraction hit. "Of course," I said without hesitation, naturally assuming she meant I would be included. But then she looked at me like I was slow to understand. "I mean Brent and me. And my mother, obviously. Her mother, who lived 3 states away, who had only visited twice during the entire pregnancy, and who had spent those 2 visits criticizing everything from the nursery's paint color to Brent's job prospects. I spent 14 long hours in that hospital waiting room while my grandson came into the world. 14 hours getting updates from Brent, who seemed almost surprised that I was still sitting there. "You don't have to wait, Mom," he told me during one brief appearance. "It might be a while longer." Where else would I go? This was my grandson, my family, my heart walking around outside my body in the form of a tiny 7-pound miracle. When I finally held Thomas, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, pure, uncomplicated joy. He was a piece of me, a piece of Tyson, living proof of the love story Tyson and I had written together. I should have known Freya wouldn't let that feeling last. Now, packing my life into cardboard boxes, I could see her plan in perfect clarity. The pregnancy had been her move in the game, the baby, her trump card. She had waited until she had it all, the house, the husband entirely under her control, and now an heir to cement her position. Then she moved to remove the last obstacle, me. The apartment I found was everything she probably hoped it would be, tiny, outdated, in a neighborhood long past its prime. The kind of place where a 72-year-old woman goes to quietly fade away. I paid the lease in cash from my checking account, the account that had just enough in it to make me look like a struggling widow scraping by on Social Security. The landlord, Mr. Chen, was kind enough not to ask too many questions about why someone my age was suddenly without a home. "Fresh start?" he asked as I handed over the deposit. "Something like that," I replied. Moving day was lonely. Brent showed up for exactly 30 minutes, carried 3 boxes to his truck, then said he had to get back to work. He avoided my eyes. "This is probably for the best, Mom," he said, loading the last box. "You need your independence, and Freya and I, we need our space." Independence. At 72, after a lifetime of marriage and motherhood, I was finally getting my independence. The word felt like poison in my mouth. "What about Thomas?" I asked quietly. "When can I see him?" Brent shifted uncomfortably. "We'll figure something out. Maybe holidays." Maybe holidays. My grandson would grow up knowing me as the grandmother who might show up once or twice a year. That first month in the apartment was the loneliest of my life. I had gone from a house that was always full of movement, sometimes even unpleasant movement, to 4 silent walls. The thin walls carried the sounds of neighbors arguing, watching TV, living their lives. Meanwhile, I sat in my small living room, wondering how I had managed to disappear so completely from my own story. I tried calling Brent twice a week, keeping the conversations light. "How's the baby? Sleeping any better? Has he smiled yet?" But even those brief exchanges felt mechanical, like he was ticking boxes on a to-do list. Then, during one of those calls, I heard something that made my blood run cold. "Brent, honey, tell the delivery guy to bring the bags upstairs." Freya's voice floated clearly through the phone. "The Chanel bags go in the master closet." Chanel bags, plural. "Mom, I have to go," Brent said quickly. "What delivery?" I asked, but the line had already gone dead. That night, I couldn't sleep. Chanel bags weren't something you bought on a construction worker's salary, not even on a foreman's wages like Brent had worked up to. Those bags cost more than most people's rent. The next week, curiosity got the better of me that day, and I found myself driving past their house, my old house. There, gleaming in the driveway, sat a bright red BMW. It wasn't Brent's sensible, no-nonsense Honda, which was nowhere in sight. This BMW still had temporary plates, its paint catching the light in a way that felt almost taunting. I pulled over across the street, telling myself I was only going to take a quick look. But once I was there, I couldn't make myself leave. I stayed parked, watching like some lovesick fool, though my feelings were far from romantic. An hour crawled by before Freya finally appeared. She stepped outside in a designer outfit I instantly recognized from a glossy magazine ad. She looked as though she'd stepped right off the page. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect clothes. She strapped little Thomas into a sleek, top-of-the-line car seat that, if I had to guess, cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Then she slid behind the wheel and pulled away. I followed. At a distance, of course. I knew how ridiculous I was being, how pathetic it looked. But I couldn't stop myself. She drove straight to the priciest shopping district in the city, the kind of place I'd never dared enter, not even back when Tyson and I were doing well financially. Freya disappeared into boutiques for hours, emerging each time with elegant shopping bags swinging from her arm, her smile smug and satisfied. The final stop was a jewelry store, and when she came out, she was wearing a pair of diamond earrings that caught the afternoon sun like they were tiny stars. That night, I called Brent again, trying to keep my voice light. "How's work, honey?" I asked. "Tough," he admitted, his tone tired. "We're working 10-hour days just to make ends meet. The baby's expensive, you know." Make ends meet. Those words rattled in my head while his wife was out buying BMWs, Chanel handbags, and diamonds. I pressed gently, "Are you getting enough help at home?" "Freya does what she can," he said, his voice softening. "But she's exhausted from the baby. She deserves nice things after what she's been through." What she's been through. Like pregnancy and childbirth were some sort of singular hardship no woman had ever endured before. Over the next few weeks, I made it my business to find out more. I began taking long walks through their neighborhood, timing them for when Brent would be at work. That BMW became a permanent fixture in their driveway, often joined by piles of glossy shopping bags from stores I recognized from the very magazines she dressed out of. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon. I was passing by when I heard voices, raised, sharp, spilling from an open window. "I don't care what your mother thinks," Freya was shouting. "She had her chance to be important, and she blew it. This is our life now." "I just want her to see Thomas," Brent's voice pleaded. "She can see him when I say she can see him. She's not taking over my son the way she tried to take over you." "Take over him. I'd raised that boy, loved him, sacrificed everything for his future. If that was what she called taking over, then what exactly was Freya doing now?" "She's lonely, Freya. Maybe if you could just..." "Just what? Let her come back? Let her undermine everything I'm trying to build here?" Her voice turned icy. "Your mother is a bitter old woman who can't accept that her time is over. The sooner you realize that, the better." Bitter old woman. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, those words cutting into me like glass. I listened as my son's wife dripped poison into his ears, twisting him away from me with words I knew I would never forget. "Maybe you're right," Brent said finally. And with that, my heart broke clean in two. That night, I sat alone in my small apartment, staring at the walls, and made a choice. For 2 months, I had been drifting, feeling sorry for myself, playing the discarded mother, shrinking into a life of silence. But I had forgotten something important. I was Tyson Murphy's wife. I was the woman who had worked 3 jobs to put her son through college, the woman who had kept her family together through illness, debt, and grief. I wasn't a victim, I was a survivor. And it was time Freya learned the difference. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized long ago, but never dared to call. "Henderson Private Investigations," a calm professional voice answered. "Yes," I said, my voice steady for the first time in months. "I'd like to hire an investigator." Marcus Henderson looked exactly like the kind of man you'd imagine in his line of work. Tired eyes, a weathered face. The quiet presence of someone who'd seen enough of life's ugliness to never be surprised by anything. His office was small and cluttered, but there was something reassuring in his calm professionalism. Mrs. Murphy, he said, pouring coffee from a pot that had definitely seen better days. What can I do for you? I had rehearsed this conversation a dozen times, but now that I was sitting across from him, I suddenly felt foolish. I want you to investigate my daughter-in-law. He didn't flinch. Any particular reason? She's spending money that doesn't exist. At least, not money that should exist based on what I know of their finances. Marcus took out a legal pad. Tell me everything. So I did. I told him about Brent's salary, the BM, the endless shopping sprees, the designer clothes. I told him about being thrown out of my own son's home, about being cut off from my grandson. I told him about the woman who had married my son and then set about dismantling everything I had built. When I finished, Marcus sat quietly for a moment. Mrs. Murphy, I have to ask, is this about revenge or is it about protecting your son? The question caught me off guard. I want to protect Brent, but I also need to understand what's happening. Because in my experience, when someone suddenly has money they shouldn't have, it usually comes from one of three sources: family money they have kept hidden, illegal activity, or someone else. Someone else? The words hung in the air like a challenge. I mean, Marcus said slowly, she could have a benefactor, someone who isn't your son. The idea had never crossed my mind, but as soon as he said it, pieces began to click into place. Freya's sudden confidence after the baby, her eagerness to push me out, her certainty she could treat Brent like nothing more than a meal ticket without ever facing consequences. How long would an investigation take, I asked. Depends what we find. Could be a week, could be a month. My retainer is $1,500. I wrote the check from my secret account, the one Freya had no idea existed. I want to know everything, where the money's coming from, what she's planning, everything. Marcus tucked the check into his desk drawer. Mrs. Murphy, can I give you some advice? I nodded. Whatever we find, it's probably going to hurt. Information like this usually does. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the last 2 months, the loneliness, the humiliation, the slow, crushing realization that my son had chosen his wife's reality over his mother's love. Mr. Henderson, I've already been hurt, I said quietly. Now I want the truth. The waiting was agony. For 2 full weeks, I heard nothing from Marcus. I went through the motions of my life, grocery shopping, library visits, long walks through my neighborhood, but my mind never left the investigation. Then one afternoon he called. Mrs. Murphy, we need to meet, he said, and you might want to sit down for this conversation. His office felt smaller this time, almost suffocating. A thick folder sat on his desk and his expression was heavier than before. I'm going to be direct, Marcus said. Your daughter-in-law is having an affair. The words hit me like a physical blow. Though somewhere deep down, I think I'd already known. With who? Richard Castellano. He owns 3 cars. The investigator didn't even glance at his notes before speaking. He owns several dealerships in the area. Married, 2 kids, worth about $8 million. $8 million. No wonder Freya could casually stroll into a Chanel boutique and walk out with a new bag without batting an eye. How long? I whispered, my voice tight, like I was afraid of the answer. Based on what I can prove, at least 6 months, probably longer. He slid a photograph across his polished desk toward me. This was taken last Tuesday at the Riverside Hotel. I picked up the photo with trembling fingers. My eyes locked on the image. Freya, wrapped in the arms of a man I didn't recognize, her face lit with a kind of joy I had never seen during her marriage to my son. Her head was thrown back, her smile wide, the picture of unguarded happiness. The sight hit me like a punch to the chest. There's more, Marcus said, his tone grim. She's been telling people she plans to leave your son just as soon as she can secure a substantial settlement. She's using the baby as leverage. My breath caught. My grandson. My beautiful, innocent grandson. Nothing more than a pawn in Freya's calculated little game. What kind of settlement? I asked. According to our sources, Marcus replied, she's been taking notes on everything your son owns, trying to get a precise idea of his net worth. She believes he has hidden family money somewhere. I almost laughed at the irony. Freya was digging for a buried fortune, completely unaware that the woman she tossed aside like yesterday's trash was sitting on a quiet $2 million of her own. She's also been telling people, Marcus continued, that your son is emotionally abusive, claims she's afraid to leave because he might try to take the baby. The accusation was so outlandish, so completely opposite to Brent's gentle, steady nature, that I felt my stomach turn. That's impossible, I snapped. Brent wouldn't hurt a fly. I know, Marcus said. But she's crafting a narrative. If she files for divorce, accuses him of abuse, she gets sympathy, a larger settlement, and most likely full custody. The words full custody rang in my ears like a threat. She would take Thomas from Brent completely, rip him away, just like she'd taken me away from my own son. There's something else, Marcus said more quietly now. She's already been in contact with a lawyer. The divorce papers are ready. She's just waiting for the right moment. I sat there feeling the air shrink around me, the office walls pressing in. My son was about to lose everything. His wife, his child, his home, his savings. And he had no idea, but I did. What would you do? I asked Marcus, my voice barely above a whisper, if it were your son. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. I'd warn him, but I'd also prepare for the possibility that he won't believe you. Men in love do foolish things, Mrs. Murphy, even when the proof is staring them in the face. I thought of Brent, grinding through 10-hour days to support a wife who was secretly planning to destroy him. Brent, who had chosen Freya over me so completely that he had cut me out of his life without hesitation. What if, I started, then faltered. A dangerous thought was taking shape in my mind, risky, possibly cruel, but maybe, just maybe, the only way to save my son. What if what? Marcus pressed. What if we let her reveal herself? I asked slowly. Give her enough rope to hang herself. One of his eyebrows lifted. What exactly do you have in mind? For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of strength rise inside me. I even smiled. I have an idea, but first, I'll need to make a withdrawal from my bank account. The plan was cruel in its simplicity, perfect for someone like Freya. She thrived on desperation, fed off weakness like a parasite, so I would give her exactly what she expected to see. First, I set the stage. I withdrew $5,000 from my secret account and opened a checking account at a different bank, one Freya might accidentally stumble across. I made sure the balance looked pitiful, just enough to make it seem like I was scraping by. Then I called Brent. Honey, I hate to bother you, and I began, adding the tiniest quiver to my voice. But I'm having trouble with my rent. I was wondering if you could help me, just this once. Silence. It stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Mom, you know things are tight right now, with the baby and everything. I understand, sweetheart, I said gently. I just thought maybe you could ask Freya if she knows anyone who might need some cleaning done. I'm willing to work. Another pause. I'll ask her, he finally said, and I knew he would. I also knew exactly what Freya's answer would be. 3 days later, the call came, not from Brent, but from Freya herself. Eileene, she said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. Brent told me about your situation. I might have something that could help you. Oh, thank you, dear, I said, layering my tone with gratitude. Well, I have some friends who need household help, but I'll be honest, they're very particular about who they hire. I'd need to vouch for you personally. Of course, I'd be happy to provide references. Actually, she said smoothly, I was thinking we could meet for coffee first, tomorrow afternoon at Cafe Luna downtown. I want to make sure you understand what would be expected. Cafe Luna. Expensive, trendy, the kind of place Freya loved to be seen. Perfect. I'll be there, I told her. And Freya, thank you for giving me this chance. Don't thank me yet, she replied, and I could hear the smug smile in her voice. The next day I prepared. I dressed in my oldest clothes, the same ones I'd worn to scrub other people's houses 40 years ago. I kept my hair plain, skipped makeup, and practiced looking defeated in the mirror until the expression felt second nature. When I walked into Cafe Luna, she was already there, holding court at a corner table with 2 women I didn't recognize. From the way they all looked up at me, I knew she'd been talking about me. Eileene, Freya called out, loud enough for half the cafe to hear. Come sit with us. I shuffled over, clutching my worn purse like it was all I had left in the world. The 2 women, Linda and Margaret, introduced themselves, both decked out in jewelry that sparkled under the cafe's soft lights. Their smiles carried the same mix of pity and superiority. So you're Brent's mother, Linda said, her eyes sweeping over me. Freya's told us about your situation. Yes, well, I let my voice waver. Things have been difficult since my husband passed. Of course they have, Margaret chimed in with syrupy kindness. It must be so hard at your age starting over. Freya ordered for all of us without asking my preference. A $30 salad I suspected she expected me to pay for. A little test to see if I really was as broke as I appeared. Now, about this job opportunity, she began, leaning forward with that faux concerned look she'd perfected. The Ashfords are looking for someone to clean their house twice a week. Big place, 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and they entertain often. That sounds wonderful, I said eagerly. What does it pay? 15 an hour, she said, watching closely for disappointment. Cash, under the table. 15 an hour to clean a mansion. Less than minimum wage. And she presented it like a blessing. I'll take it, I replied without hesitation. When can I start? Well, she said, her voice dipping into that sweet, manipulative tone. There's just one small problem. They just had to twist the knife. There's a security deposit, Linda announced. It's $200 to make sure you don't walk off with anything. $200 I couldn't afford to lose. I'm not sure I have that much, I admitted, letting a raw edge of panic slip into my voice. Oh, that's unfortunate, she said, her tone utterly free of sympathy. The Ashfords are very particular about their help. I scrambled for a lifeline. Maybe I could work for free the first few weeks. Just to prove myself, I suggested, the words coming out desperate and small. Freya exchanged a knowing look with her friends. I don't think that would work. They need someone who can commit financially. Please, my voice cracked as I leaned forward. I'm behind on rent. I could lose my apartment. Her eyes lit up with unmistakable satisfaction. This was the moment she'd been savoring, seeing me on my knees, stripped of dignity, begging for scraps. Well, she drawled, drawing it out like a cat toying with its prey. I suppose I could lend you the money. A family loan. You do that? My eyes stung with tears, but I forced myself to meet hers. Of course, family helps family. She pulled out her phone and pretended to calculate. $200 for the deposit plus interest. Let's say 25%. You'll owe me $250. 25% interest on a $200 loan. Even legal loan sharks charge less. I don't know how to thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me yet, she said, her smile cold as steel. I'll need you to sign a promissory note. If you can't pay it back in 30 days, there'll be additional fees. From her bag, she pulled a folded sheet of paper, already prepared, and slid it across the table with a pen. The terms were worse than she'd stated. Compound interest, late fees, a clause that let her seize my few possessions if I defaulted. This seems complicated, I murmured as I scanned it. Business is business, Eileene, she replied sharply. If you can't handle simple financial obligations, maybe you shouldn't be working for people like the Ashfords. Her friends nodded in smug agreement, clearly enjoying every second. Of course, which I said, my hand trembling as I signed in. I'm just grateful for the opportunity. Freya counted out $200 in cash slowly, making sure the entire cafe could see what a generous soul she was. There you go. Don't disappoint me. I won't, I promised, clutching the money like a lifeline. As I left, I heard her voice, pitched just loud enough to carry. Some people never learn to take care of themselves. It's really quite sad. The sharp, cutting laughter followed me out the door. But I wasn't crying, not this time. I was smiling, because in front of a room full of witnesses, Freya had just shown everyone exactly who she was. And the hidden recorder in my purse had caught it all. Every word, every cruel laugh, every calculated pause. Now I had everything I needed to show my son the truth about his wife. The call came on a Sunday morning, exactly 3 weeks after that cafe encounter. Brent's voice was hollow, stripped of life in a way I'd never heard before. Mom, I need to see you. Of course, honey, what's wrong? Not over the phone, can you come over? Freya's at her mother's with the baby. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in the living room where I used to belong, watching my son pace like a restless, caged animal. He looked awful, thinner, worn down, aged beyond his 32 years. She's leaving me, he said without preamble. Freya's filing for divorce. My heart ached for him, even though I'd seen this coming from miles away. Oh, Brent, I'm so sorry. She says I'm emotionally abusive, controlling, manipulative. His laugh was bitter, humorless. She's taking Thomas. I might only get supervised visitation. That's ridiculous. You're the gentlest man I know. Try telling that to her lawyer. He collapsed into his father's old chair, looking smaller somehow. She's accusing me of hiding assets. Says I've been lying about our finances. She wants half of everything, plus alimony and child support. Hidden assets. The irony was almost laughable, if it hadn't been so devastating. Brent, there's something I need to tell you about Freya. His eyes flickered with something I hadn't seen in weeks. Hope. What do you mean? I had rehearsed this moment so many times. But now, sitting across from my broken son, the words felt heavy, dangerous. She's been lying to you about a lot of things. I told him everything about my investigation, about Richard Castellano, about months of planning and deceit. I showed him the photographs, played him the recording from the cafe, spread out the evidence of his wife's cold-blooded cruelty. With every revelation, Brent's face drained of color. When I finally stopped, he sat there in silence for several long minutes. "How long have you known?" he asked at last. "About the affair? A few weeks? About her plan to leave? Not long enough to stop it, I'm afraid. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" The question I dreaded. "Because you wouldn't have believed me. You needed to see it for yourself." He flinched but didn't argue. We both knew I was right. "There's something else," I said quietly. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." From my purse, I pulled a bank statement and handed it to him. His eyes widened. $2 million, he whispered. "Your father's insurance, his retirement accounts, and some investments you didn't know about. I've been keeping it safe. All this time, you've been living in that apartment, letting Freya treat you like—" He couldn't finish. "Like hired help? Like a burden?" I said softly. "Yes." "But why? Why wouldn't you just tell me?" I took his calloused, almost hands, rough from endless overtime, into mine. "Because I wanted to see who you'd become without money clouding the picture. I wanted to know if the son I raised was still there, under everything else." "And what did you find?" His voice was thick with pain. "I found a man who loves his family so deeply, he'll sacrifice anything for them. Even his relationship with his mother." Tears slid down his face. "I'm so sorry, Mom, for everything." "I know, sweetheart, I know. What do I do now? She's going to take Thomas. She'll destroy me in court." I smiled, feeling that old, steady strength return. "No, she's not, because we're going to beat her at her own game." For the next hour, I laid it all out. We'd let Freya move forward with the divorce, let her believe she was winning. We'd document everything. Everything, her affair, her lies, her manipulation. And when the time came, we'd walk into court not with desperate accusations, but with irrefutable evidence. "And the money?" Brent asked. "It'll be protected in a trust for Thomas. She can't touch it, but it will secure his future." "What about you, Mom? What about your future?" I stood in the middle of the house where I had raised my son, the place where Tyson and I had woven the fabric of our life together. Every wall, every corner held years of memories, holidays spent laughing in the living room, quiet evenings on the porch, the sound of my boy's footsteps running down the hallway. But somehow it all felt different now, lighter, as if a heavy weight that had been pressing down on the house for years had finally been lifted. "I'm going to buy a house, Brom," I said out loud, almost surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "A beautiful one with a guest room for my son and a nursery for my grandson. A home where family will always be truly welcome." 3 months later, I found myself standing in the kitchen of that very home. The afternoon sun streamed through the wide windows, spilling golden light across the countertops. Outside through the glass doors, I could see Brent in the backyard, gently pushing Thomas in his stroller across the soft grass of the spacious yard. The divorce had been finalized only 2 weeks earlier. When confronted with undeniable evidence of her affair, along with her carefully laid plans to manipulate the situation, Freya had chosen to settle for joint custody rather than risk losing everything in a public trial. She had kept the BMW and her collection of designer clothes, but she had lost the house, the sense of security she'd clung to, and most importantly, the control she had fought so hard to maintain. As for Richard Castellano, the man she had risked it all for, he had vanished from her life the very moment his wife discovered the affair. My thoughts were interrupted by the chime of the doorbell. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and went to answer it. Standing on the porch was a delivery man holding the largest bouquet of flowers I'd ever seen. "Eileene Murphy?" he asked, checking his clipboard. "That's me," I replied. He handed over the bouquet, and as he walked away, I pulled out the small envelope tucked between the blossoms. My breath caught when I read the words inside. "Thank you for never giving up on us. Love, Brent and Thomas." Through the kitchen window, I looked back outside. Brent had stopped by the edge of the trees, lifting his little boy out of the stroller. He was pointing toward the branches overhead, speaking in that animated sing-song voice that parents use when they want to share the wonder of the world with their children. And I knew without a doubt that Thomas would grow up surrounded by his grandmother's love. He would learn that family is about showing up, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. He would come to understand that real strength can sometimes take the form of quiet patience, and that the most meaningful victories are often the ones no one else sees or hears. Somewhere, I imagined Freya sitting in an expensive apartment, staring out at the city skyline, wondering how her plans had unraveled so completely. She had made one fatal miscalculation. She had mistaken my quiet love for weakness. She had learned too late that there is a world of difference between kindness and weakness, between making sacrifices and surrendering entirely. At 72 years old, I had taken back not only my dignity, but my family. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the future stretched out before me, glowing as brightly as I had always dreamed it could be.